Welcome to the podcast, Melody and Friends, where I will be taking a virtual tour around the world and interviewing all kinds of wonderful people. And today I land in Memphis, Tennessee to speak with my new friend, Melanie Redd, about just rest, learning not to be afraid because we have such a great God. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you, Melody. It's so good to be here. Our names are so similar. It's a lot of fun.
I know we say Mel.
Yes.
Well, this is a real treat for me. I think you and I were talking just a few minutes ago about how my precious intern, Julia, is on a hunt to just find beautiful, wonderful, gospel-rich women who can encourage other women. And so I'm just really excited about sitting down and having a conversation and a cup of coffee with you.
Thank you. I was talking with someone the other day about how amazing it is. And it may be the way heaven's going to be, because I meet people online. I have people reach out to me. They message me on Instagram or Facebook and say, can we have coffee? We've never met. We get together at a bookstore, a coffee shop, and just talk. And I love how, because we love the same God, it unites our hearts. So it's fun to be here and just talk about him today.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't. And it's amazing to me over the years of just podcasting, how close I feel to people, like kindred close. And I've never even met them in person. And so it's really, really amazing. So I think I'm going to feel that exact same way about you. I do have a best friend in Memphis, Tennessee. So one of these days I'll have to connect with you physically for a cup of coffee when I'm in Memphis.
Yeah, we'll have to meet in real life. And I have to tell you a funny story.
Yeah.
Years ago, I'm a blogger. I've been blogging for about 9 years. And I was in this blogging group, and we would read each other's posts and comment. So we got to know each other really well. We're in a Facebook group. And we even did some, I don't know if we Zoomed. This may have been pre-Zoom. But we actually got together, and all of our husbands thought we were crazy. We met at a girl's house in Phoenix, and we had the best. We didn't stop talking for 3 days. And I thought, it is so amazing how our hearts can be knit like that. So this is fun.
Those are those glimmers of heaven that he gives us here on earth, don't you believe?
I think so.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, for those people that don't know anything about Melanie, why don't you just give us a little dive into your story and how it's ebbed and flowed throughout your life, and then we'll dive into the books that you've written and all the things.
Sure, absolutely. Well, the short form of me is I'm a wife, a pastor's wife. My husband's actually a professor and a music minister at this point, but I tell people he can marry, he can baptize, and he can do spreadsheets. And so he's kind of a jack of all trades, which makes it a lot of fun. We've been married 32 years. And we have 2 young adult kids. Riley's 30 and Emily's 27. And we have 2 Australian Shepherds, one's a mini. And so that's kind of our story in a nutshell. But as far as how I met the Lord and what my story is I came to Christ when I was 11. I was sitting in church. I grew up in church. In fact, my parents told me I was there from the time I was 6 weeks old. So I don't remember not being in church, but I remember sitting in the service, and a man was talking about, did he really know Jesus? If he were to die, would he go to heaven? It was that simple. And for some reason that night, we were in a big church for those days, but I was near the front, and it was like I just knew, no, I've been in church, but I don't know Jesus personally. And so that's the night I gave my life and my heart to him. And then what was really cool is the same year, a girl that was a senior when I was in 7th grade came to me and said, can I start hanging out with you every week? I want to disciple you. And I didn't even know what it meant, but she taught me how to pray and how to have a quiet time. And we talked a lot about dating and boys and purity and life. And I believe God just used that to set the trajectory. We may have to fix that. The future course of my life. And it is amazing how I tell people, I feel like I fell in love with Jesus when I was 11, and I've never gotten over it. And so it's not been a perfect journey. I will not say that after all these years, but I've been walking with him a long time now. And it's interesting looking back. I had a friend that asked me recently to share what grace means to me. And she said, what has God done? Because you came to Christ at such a young age. You know, I don't have one of those crazy stories. I wasn't in a motorcycle gang. I didn't go do a lot of crazy things. But what God's done in my life is he's worked on the inside. And I think a lot of church people, this is what he does. If you grew up in church and you didn't have some wild living, he has to work in other ways on our hearts. And I shared a blog post, even it's not even printed yet, but I had to think about this recently. And she said, I want you to share something truthful. And so maybe someone who's not had a wild life, but could relate to this, because we all deal with sin. They just don't look the same, you know? And what I came to realize is during my growing up years, my biggest issue was that I wanted to please everybody. I am a people pleasing firstborn, excuse me, see how high you can raise the bar girl. And it was like, if you set the bar a certain way, I'd just say, no, I can do it even higher.
Wow.
And it actually became kind of an idol. And I don't think I realized it. I just was living to try to do the best, be the best, do the most, be the most, succeed, outdo, you know, and that included in my Christian life. I had to have the best devotions, longest prayer time, you know, learn the most verses, witness the best. And I don't even think I realized I was doing it. I just was going to this beat and going hard and going fast. And a crazy thing happened. We moved, and I was in my early 30s. I had little children. And somewhere in that moment where I was exhausted, my husband was working long hours at the time, I got really, I wouldn't call it depressed. I would call it distressed. But I just lost my joy and I got really sad. And it was in those days, God put some people in my life that helped me realize that I had my ladder leaning against the wrong building. I was going for all the wrong things. I began to learn God just loved and accepted me just like I was. And there was nothing to prove. And it doesn't sound necessarily like some huge revelation, but when I really got it, it was huge. It was like, he just loves me. I don't have to do the best and be the most. And I don't have to please anybody but him.
Well, and it's so interesting. It's almost like I picture this duck, you know, that's kind of gliding along a swan obviously would glide a little bit better. But if we look at a duck just sitting on the water doing its thing, you know, it looks calm. But what they don't see under the water is this going like this whole time. And so that perspective, that shift that you're talking about is, it may not look differently from the outside, but on the inside, that mouse on the wheel, or sometimes we talk about that run in at level 10 on the treadmill, that begins to simmer down and slow down as we really understand the peace of God, and that he's singing a unique melody over us. And we do because he loves us. We don't do to get and earn that love. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Oh, it's so freeing.
Totally can relate.
Yeah, when you realize Romans 8 talks about nothing can separate us from God's love, and we start to realize we can't do anything to make him love us more, and we can't do anything to make him love us less. It's just not going to change. It's amazing how freeing it is. It's almost like I was driving a sailboat, but I had the motor on and the sails. And when I turned the motor off and just let the sails go, there's just freedom in my life. And I will say I've enjoyed my relationship with the Lord in the last decade so much more than I did when I started, because I learned the fact that Jesus just loves us.
That's so good. That's so good. Were there times, I guess, in seasons throughout the course of your life where you really had to challenge, you know, or really maybe lean into those beliefs a lot more, you know, where maybe the sails and the engine had to be turned back on again?
Oh yeah, every day. I still am tempted. It's just the way I'm geared and put together. I think God made me. I'm just kind of that achiever type personality, but I'm learning to also be the enjoyer, and to learn to enjoy the moments, and to learn to breathe in and realize this is life. I'm not trying to get somewhere. I am there.
That's right.
And I think sometimes I saw a sign that says collect moments, not people and not things. And so it's a daily thing. I have to say, Lord, I just want to enjoy you. And I heard Henry Blackaby speak. He's the guy that wrote Experiencing God. And he said, he gets up every day and he said, God, what are we doing today? And I'm learning to be more like that. So I have a clipboard over here to my side, and I keep it and I keep notes, but I'm learning to scrub it all if God changes my plans. And so it's a daily thing. I am learning. I probably will be learning until I get to heaven.
Definitely learning until we get to heaven. Absolutely. In a process, and actually progress, and instead of perfection, just in a process. Yeah, I love that. Well, how did you how did you end up in writing? I don't think you told me about like your backstory as far as like college and what you did to get you to where you're writing books and things like that.
It's a fun story, actually.
Yeah.
And it goes way back. I had to think about it. Somebody had asked me this last year, and I thought back. I grew up in a neighborhood with all boys. There were a ton of kids, and we had this playroom upstairs, and we actually created magazines. I loved to do creative writing as a child. And it was just came easy to me. Give me an essay any day over a Scantron. And so it was just kind of my thing. And so that kind of was my start. And then in college, I was encouraged by some of my professors to write. My background is education and English.
Okay.
And as a teacher, I taught writing. But I was in my 20s, just out of college. I got contacted by Lifeway Christian Resources in Nashville, and they started sending me projects. And so I wrote magazine articles. I wrote Sunday school curriculums, what they used to call it. They're these little booklets. Mostly older people use them in their Sunday school classes or their Bible studies. And they're kind of shiny. I wrote a ton of those. I had a stack of them for a while. Somebody writes all the questions and a lot of the literature for the teachers, because the teachers need something to go by. So that was kind of where I started. And then I just began to blog years ago, and I wrote those, and people began to ask me for help. They would say, how do you have a quiet time? And how do you pray? And I was writing, or early computers, I was typing. But my husband finally said, why don't you put that in a book? And so in 2010, I wrote my first book, and it's called Stepping Closer to the Savior. And it's just a book about how to grow as a Christian, real simple steps anybody could pick up to learn about how to just get a little closer to the Lord. And so that's kind of where I started. And here we are 13 years later, I have 9 published books. And so it's just kind of been a process. People ask me that, and I'm like, you just stay close to the Lord. He knows where you are. He knows your address and your phone number. I mean, you can get an agent, go to all those events if you want and try to get noticed. But I believe God's the best marketing agent that there is. And so he's just opened doors and sent things my way and had people call me. And it's been really fun to just let him lead in that.
I love it. Now, you said 9 books. So do those all just come from different seasons in your life, or you just wake up one day and all of a sudden this is the idea that you have and you start writing it, or what does that look like? That's an amazing creative process.
It's been an adventure, and I've done ghostwriting, which means you put together the book for somebody else. I've done about 10 of those. Wow. And so your name, a lot of times your name's not on it, but that's been fun. But I think for me, it's just been seasons, but it's also been kind of fun. I had a publisher several years ago. This was about 4 years ago. I was on Instagram. I got on Instagram and I started doing these little devotions. And, Instagram, the captions are 200 to 300 words. Yeah. And so I got an email from this publisher in California. I thought it was a joke. And we got on a Zoom call, though, and they said, we've been kind of stalking your Instagram, and we want you to take what you're doing and put it in a book. We want you to write some devotions for teenage girls. And so 4 years ago, we put together this little book, wrote it in a month because it was all little devotions, 50,000 words. And it's called Live in Light, 5-minute devotions for teen girls. That book is a bestseller. It has sold over 100,000 copies. It's been crazy, but those people call me again and again. So I did 3 devotions for that company. And then somebody saw that book and asked me to come write for their company, their publishing house. And that's where the newest book came from. And then I've self-published a couple. And I tell people, unless you're a writer, nobody knows where it's published. I tell people all the time, if you want to write a book, write it, self-publish it. If you've got something to say, put it on paper. It's just a lot of hard work. So I would answer that seasons. It's been seasonal, and there may be some more that God will give me. I'm not writing one right this second, which is kind of nice, but I've done some compilations where I actually wrote like a few chapters or a few pages, and that's been fun too. But it's just been kind of the great adventure, almost like we do with our hairstyles and our clothing styles. And I just I guess that's my learning not to be so intense and people pleasing. I'm taking it one book at a time and 1 year at a time.
And that's good. That really is good. You're not 10 years down the road going, this is what I'm going to do. So that's awesome. Well, your last book was about finding rest. And I think it's very interesting that you, the big achiever, is talking about rest. Yes. So give me kind of the backstory of how this book came about.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. A girl reached out to me. It was actually during COVID and all the lockdowns. And so we met in a coffee shop and you could take your mask off if you were drinking coffee. So we just kept drinking coffee so we could talk. It was hilarious because it was open and we could go in. But she wanted me to write a book, especially related to younger women, about how to not be so anxious and fearful and doubting and worried. And it was good for me to do that. I'm intense, but I don't know that I'm super anxious all the time. But God just, as I began to pray over that book, I had a long time to write it. She gave me almost too long. I'm almost better if you give me 2 months or a month. She gave me about 6 months. So I was like, oh my goodness. And I began to walk and kind of pray. And I thought, Lord, I can't just say every day, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. I thought that's just 90 days of that. And so I began to look up verses, and God just gave me this idea. What if every day, instead of, you can say, don't worry, but then point them back to some aspect of my character and who I am. So, for example, if you don't feel like anybody sees you, you can read about the story of Hagar, where she says, you're the God who sees me. When you feel alone, you read about God saying, I never leave you. I'm always with you. I'm by your side. I'm the God who hears. And so every day goes through a scripture, mostly in the Old Testament, about the character of God. It's not a super heavy theological book, but it's woven into the pages. And so the goal is it's a scripture, then a devotion, and then I have this part called a declaration. One of my friends is big on this, where you're supposed to say it out loud. Yeah. And so, for example, on the day about Hagar, you will say, Lord, I'm so glad you're the God who sees me. You see my life today. You know where I am. You know what I'm going through. I thank you that you're the God who sees. And it's just to teach you and to learn that God's character is trustworthy. And then there's a prayer. And then what I love, and this is some of that teacher in me, but the whole back page is a journal.
Do you have your book next to you?
It is not sitting by me. I can grab one.
Yeah, grab one.
You want me to go grab one?
Yeah. I want everybody to see it.
My dog's getting excited. Okay, we'll grab the book.
I always think it's good to have a visual. We'll put the links in the show notes, but yeah, I love that. It's very calming.
It's really pretty. And it's those watercolor colors. But on this back page is all like teacher questions, like, what do you do with this? So yeah, God sees me. So what? And that's kind of it's to get you thinking about what difference will this make in my life today? And hopefully to make it kind of cement the scripture and the thought for the day in your life, And so there's 90, and I love it. It's beautiful. It was meant for 20-something-year-olds, but all my friends have said, I'm young at heart. Can I get a copy?
That's right. So, that's right.
I would say it's for any woman, and it's been a lot of fun to hear from people. And they tell me, they said, it was my calming. It was with my cup of coffee. It's what I did every day for 3 months, and some people have gone back through, but you never know what God's going to use. But for me, it was calming. And to think about God is able, and who he is, really, he's good. He loves me. And so somehow focusing on who he was instead of focusing on what I'm afraid of or nervous about or anxious over changes the whole perspective. When I look up instead of looking within or looking around, it changes me.
Yeah, I think that look up is a powerful word. And I'm a big journaler. And so I really encourage women, like when that worry or that thought, doesn't get out, writing it out on paper. I'm worried about my son getting into college, or I'm worried about, finances this month. And when we can get it out of our head, just running around in circles and out on paper, and then like what you said, then begin to read about these stories and begin to, see God who through who he is. I'm a big advocate, like you said, of just basically reminiscing and repeating the names of God. But then I love how you have that declaration. And I just think saying it out loud is very powerful. If none other, for you to hear it yourself out loud audibly, but also I think for the enemy to hear, this is what I'm declaring over my life in this moment.
Yeah. And it's like a battle cry.
Yeah, it is a battle cry.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll just pray out loud. I'm like, and I like to declare it out. I hear myself. Satan hears me. Other people might hear, but it frees you, I think, in a way, because you're speaking it out loud.
Yeah.
And I also tell people, I was talking to a girl the other day, we were talking about how encouraging it is to sometimes tell someone else, to not keep it inside. Because when one of my favorite pastors, I'm with him, I work with a ministry part-time called Love Worth Finding, and the pastor's name is Adrian Rogers. Yeah. And he has this quote. He says, what we uncover, God covers, but what we cover, God will have to uncover. Right. And so there's something about just laying it out sometimes with a trusted friend. if we're really struggling, or if there's a great victory that just gives us, it just kind of makes it more real.
I love that. I love that. And I do love that. Obviously that book, Just Rest, is for anybody,
Yeah.
but I do think that we're living in a culture, especially the younger generation, where there's just more anxiety. There's, everything's at your fingertips, and, there's all the social media. And so I think just to spend those few moments, I think you said 5 minutes, just
Yeah.
5 minutes of just sitting and resting, unplugged, bringing in the Father, and just declaring those things of who he is, who he's called us to be, I think is such a beautiful opportunity for
Yeah.
especially the younger generation, just to get into that daily practice.
Yeah, because I think they're so connected to these.
Yeah.
And there's, to get away from the notifications, to get away from the noise and just be still for a minute is very freeing.
Yeah,
So,
it is.
yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's not going anywhere. You can stick it in another room and come right back to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes. Thank you. I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about getting this out to everybody. I really am. So you said that you've got 2 adult children.
I do.
So y'all are empty nesting, but not really, because you have 2 Australian shepherds who keep you quite alert and awake, don't you?
Kind of. Basically, our daughter and one dog moved to Nashville, but our son has moved back home. Okay. And then it was too quiet. So at Christmas, we got a new dog. So we got the baby Aussie. And so we decided, we laughed the other night. We were like, he's really busy and he's really fast and he's really young. And we were like, we might be too old and slow for this dog.
They're amazing. They have so much energy.
Yeah. He's super cute. And he goes in the backyard and zoomies. He just runs and runs and runs, and then he plops down. So it's been so much fun. It has.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, any final words that you just want to leave us with before we wrap this up?
Well, I was thinking about one of my favorite verses is from Psalm 118, where David's talking and he says, "This I know, the Lord is for me, and I will not fear what man can do to me." And I would just encourage anybody that's watching or listening, God is for you. He adores you. He loves you. He is on your side. and sometimes we just have to put our blinders on and be reminded, no matter what's going on around us or what's going on, in other people in our lives, we need to focus on the fact that God is for us and that God loves us and that God is with us and he'll get us through. So keep your eyes looking up. Keep your eyes on Jesus. That would be my encouragement.
Yeah, I love the look up. That's been something I think in the last year or two. It's just like, whatever's happening, just look up. Whatever's happening, just look up. And
well, it's Snoopy, the great theologian Snoopy. One of his cartoons, he says, that's the secret to life, looking up. Keep looking up. So yeah, that's probably my best word for people is quit looking around, quit looking down, quit looking within, look up.
That's awesome. Yeah. That is awesome. All right. So for those that want to come find you, give us all the ways to get in touch with you. And then we'll put these in the show notes to make sure people can click and get right to you. Absolutely.
Well, you can find me anywhere on social, on all the channels, I think, except maybe Snapchat. Okay. But it's melanieredd.com and Melanie Redd, REDD. And so if you'll find me, I tell people, if you'll reach out and tell me where you saw me or met me or heard me, we'll connect. I love to connect with people, especially on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. And so look for me. Let's get connected. I would love to meet some of your listeners and watchers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate this. And I do continue to just love Zoom, that I don't have to drive to Memphis to have this interview with you.
No, it is fun.
Here in our homes. And so just thank you for opening up your schedule and spending some time with us.
Oh, I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
This episode has been brought to you by Life Beyond Betrayal. Life Beyond Betrayal is a comprehensive program that provides a community as well as 3 courses for women. The first course is Surviving Trauma Beyond Betrayal. Our second course is called Grieving Beyond Betrayal. And the third course is called Reclaiming You Beyond Betrayal. This is a self-paced program that you can take as long as you want to go through, and also provides a community so you feel like you have the support that you need. So check out Life Beyond Betrayal membership at lifebeyondbetrayal.com.